Hello, and welcome to the Infinite Financial Freedom Podcast, where we empower you with financial literacy and guide you on your journey to financial freedom. I'm Josh Metal, and I'm here today with Igor Michael Kajpust, president of Evolve Property Group, based out of Los Angeles, investing primarily in residential real estate in LA, Denver, Chicago, probably a lot of other places that I don't know of yet that I'm excited to learn about. What I find really fascinating about Igor is that at a relatively young age of 27, he's been buying, renovating, flipping residential properties for 10 years. 10 years. And he's been doing it all across the country, which I find fascinating that he's been able to replicate the business in Chicago. I know he has a business partner and some business that he does in Florida, Denver, LA, like to be able to create that at this age across the country. I don't know how he does it, and I'm excited to figure out how he's done it. But he acquired his first property, in case you're not good at math, he acquired his first property at 17 and never looked back. So Igor, it is a pleasure to have you, brother. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time, Josh, and setting all this up. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Well, let's drop some knowledge, man. And the first thing I want to do is I want to know a little bit more about your history. I think it's fascinating, but how did you get into real estate at such a young age? And dude, just honestly, how did you have the balls to buy your first property at age 17?
No, that's awesome. Great question. So yeah, I mean, going back, like I'm a first generation immigrant. So my parents brought us from Poland when we were, I was 9, 10 years old, coming to America, not speaking the language and everything. And like super early as I can remember in like elementary school, was the first thing I remember, like trying to buy and sell stuff, to make a buck and get some spending money. Allowance and chores are not like chores are a concept, but the allowance part is not a concept in Poland. So, I had to figure out a way if I wanted to, get something, I needed to make my own money. So, a buddy of mine, when we were in elementary school, comes over to my house once with a empty cooler, and he's like, "Hey, let's grandma load this up with ice. We're going down to Aldi down the street, and we're going to sell water bottles and drinks to people in the parking lot." So we go get, a case of Propel waters for $3 and sell them each for $1 or whatever. Take people's, at that time it was Aldi, you had to put a quarter in the cart to get the cart. So we follow people out of the store and say, "Hey, we'll unload your groceries and put everything away. Just let us keep the quarter and we'll put the cart, a cart back." So
Great.
I was, as long as I could remember, always trying to buy and sell stuff and do little businesses and things like that. So, I think it was kind of a natural evolution. And at that time, I mean, that first purchase was a cheap, quarter acre of land in the desert somewhere in Colorado that I found on the internet when I was, starting to get interested in the real estate. So it really wasn't a thing where I was even looking at, be fearful of the deal or anything. And, I just I was bidding on it. I was hanging out in like my bedroom in high school with a bunch of friends. I'm like, "Hey, I'm going to buy this land right now. I think like I'm winning the auction." So yeah, bought it, and then I still have that property. It's probably not worth much, but it was a good first, kind of dipping the toe in the water. And yeah, like having the balls to do it wasn't even really a factor. I wasn't scared about it. Once my mom found out I did it, she's like, "What the hell? You're going to lose all your money." Blah, blah, blah. I was like, "No, this is great." So, yeah, that's kind of how that came to be.
Right on, man. I love that. You remind me of the story when I was, I think I was 12 or 13 years old. I was in the Boy Scouts, and I would go when my mom would go like grocery shopping. I'd wait outside and I would sell tickets to the Boy Scout Jamboree. And I would just, follow people all the way to their cars, trying to sell them Boy Scout tickets. And I ended up winning the most Jamboree tickets sold by any Boy Scout in California. And it was just like, why not? Like what's the worst thing that's going to happen? I love that youthful enthusiasm to just go try stuff and have that growth mindset. And then for you, it sounds like it parlayed from bottled water to real estate, and it just kind of grew on your successes.
Yeah, for sure. See, like nowadays, if you told like your agents, hey, go hit the parking lot at the grocery store, it's like, what? But when we were younger, when we were kids, we're like, yeah, this is nothing wrong with this. This works.
Yeah, I didn't have any video games or anything else to do, so we might as well go try to make a buck.
That's right. No, it was cool. And it was a transition, like through water bottles and stuff like that to like cell phones and laptops and then, cars and motorcycles and stuff like that. And just like kind of gradually finding the next thing and ultimately landing on the real estate. So it's been a cool journey so far. Still a long way to go, but interesting progression to reflect back on for sure.
So did you ever have a moment where you landed on selling real estate where you were thinking, like, man, I need something bigger to sell because there's more dollars attached to it. Like there's only so much money I can make selling a cell phone. There's only so much money I can make selling a stereo system. There's only so much money I can make selling furniture. But a $1 million house, I can make a lot of money selling $1 million. Did you ever have one of those moments where it kind of like changed your trajectory or path?
Yeah, it was kind of, I wouldn't say it was an exact kind of moment that it happened. I think it was like at that time I was doing cars and stuff and I was like getting towards the end of high school. And I actually did in high school, I got recruited into a VIMA. It was like a multi-level marketing company.
Okay, cool.
And I mean, I'll say that was a moment that was like kind of like game changing for me, was getting introduced to all of the like Tony Robbins and Zig Ziglar, all the like motivational stuff. And that was at the time, I know we were talking, you said the Rich Dad Poor Dad, I read that book and all of the like Think and Grow Rich, all that stuff. And I was like, what am I doing selling, cars? I could do whatever I want, anything is possible. And so I was like looking at stock trading and kind of real estate, because I just stumbled into it online, like the courses and stuff, like seeing the guru videos. And I was like, this guy can make all this money doing a house. You don't even have to own it or whatever. And I was like, this is great on the guru sales pitch. So that mixed with the new, new lens on life of like all the self-help stuff, I was like, dude, screw this stuff. I'm going full-time real estate. Like I'm gonna be a billionaire. So that was the flip.
I love it. I love it. If anybody can do it, it's you. I'm excited to interview you in 40 years again. See where you're at. I'll tell you a funny story. I don't know why this came up for me, but I remember I was in a car driving with my mom, and my mom was asking me this question, like, what are you going to do when you grow up? And I'm like, dude, I think I'm at like 8 or 9 or 10. Like I'm very young. And I was like, well, I've been thinking about that a lot. Because I told you, earlier before we turned on the podcast, that money for me had always been this conundrum. Like, how is it that we have so little money? And I'm looking at these LA skyscrapers that are 80 stories in the world. It was just 80 stories high. And I was just fascinated by money and how some people seem to have the formula. Like, what does that mean? Oh, well, that person has money. Well, how the hell did they get money? I was just fascinated by that. So anyways, I tell my mom, I'm like, Mom, I figured it out. When I grow up, I'm going to be a toilet paper salesman. And she's like, you're going to sell toilet paper? Why? And I'm like, well, because everybody needs it and they're always going to need it. It seems like it's going to be super easy to sell. And if you don't have it, it really sucks. I'm going to be a toilet paper salesman. And she encouraged me to keep working on that thesis just a little bit. And then I came back to her a little while later and I said, okay, I figured it out. I found something else that's everybody needs. But I don't have to sell as many rolls of toilet paper, because she helped me understand, there's probably not a lot of profit there. And I was like, I want to work at a house lot. She's like, what the hell is a house lot? I'm like, well, when we go to buy a car, we go to a car lot. Like, don't they sell houses that way at a house lot?
No way. That's so cool.
But just a funny kid, the funny way a kid's mind works. And at the age of probably 10, I knew I wanted to do something having to do with houses and real estate. Didn't have any idea why. Eventually, Kiyosaki helped me kind of formalize and sharpen my ideas there. But I just kind of find those ideas as kids really fascinating.
That's super cool, though. Like such a young kid, like it sounds like, what you said about your mother and she was an entrepreneur and everything, and those conversations that you guys had at such a young age, like where that's even a concept you're thinking of, you're like, hey, house lot, like that's really, really interesting. That's super cool. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really even like consider real estate. I was just doing my stuff, buy and sell this, like make some, pocket money or whatever, try to make some money. But I didn't know even up until I was like a senior in high school when I did the MLM stuff. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Like my parents were like, go to community college, be an electrician, or like do a CDL license. I was like, I don't know, like none of that is really, resonating with me super well. So, it was yeah, it's interesting how we all come to like, these kind of crossroads and pick out our path in life. But yeah, that's interesting to hear how I was 10 years old. You were on the house lot, wanted to be on the house lot.
Yeah, I've been weird from day one, brother. All right. So look, let's dig into the meat of your business a little bit and help some people understand how you've gotten to where you are at such a young age. So my understanding is you started off as kind of a wholesaler, and I think we should define what a wholesaler is. And you've really evolved into more renovation, really improving the quality and the attractiveness of the property to eventually, and now your major business is flipping. So, and then I was reading one of your is a podcast that I heard you do, and you talked about one of the things that was a unique value proposition or something that you do well is your ability to find a deal that other people aren't able to uncover. So let's kind of go through that from wholesale to flipping. Anything you can share with us about success that you've found there, and then how do you find these deals?
Yeah, awesome. So just a quick overview on what wholesaling is. It's basically like the stuff that you see on Instagram and everywhere where they say, get into real estate, no money down, you could flip properties without owning them. And, that's kind of the sales pitch. But basically how it works is, going out, let's say you've got an investor who buys rental properties in a city and he wants a 3-bed, 2-bath house, and, he could pay up to $125,000. As a wholesaler, your job is to go out, hunt for those types of properties that fit his criteria. And let's say he's willing to pay 125. Your job is to get it under contract for 115,000. You then basically sell that end buyer your spot in the contract, just called an assignment of contract, and they pay you a fee to basically take your spot as the buyer in that contract. So in that case, they'd give you the $10,000 difference. They get to buy the property for 115, so they're into it for 125. The seller gets their 115, you get your 10, and that's basically what a wholesale deal looks like. So being that I didn't have a huge amount of money to start with, that was what I gravitated to, and kind of started to get my footing in the business with, was basically hunting down these good deals and selling them off to other investors for assignment fees.
So before we go to, that was a perfect explanation, by the way, thank you. Before we go into the whole flipping and kind of where that's evolved to now, how are you finding these properties, and why is it that the investor didn't just go find these properties for themselves?
Yeah, and that's a good question, because most of the time investors are okay with paying the fee, but sometimes they, if you're making sometimes a pretty considerable fee up front, it looks like you didn't really do anything, they're hesitant to sometimes want to pay that up. Right. Usually they're understanding, but that's a good question. I like that you bring it up, because it's really what the majority of our business, like in the flipping business and with all the marketing that we do, like a lot of time is spent on this and finding these good deals. So it's really, especially in a market where inventory is so constrained, like right now, where people don't want to sell stuff, even for top dollar market value, getting them for 10, 20, 30, 40% discounts is even more challenging. Sure. But it's basically, getting in front of the right person with the right message, and doing that as many times as possible until, you get one that makes sense. Yeah. So how that looks like for us at this point, and it's evolved a lot over time, but, we're doing really targeted marketing campaigns, outbound and inbound, to, certain kind of properties and people that fit certain parameters. Mm-hmm. So that might be, we're scraping county records to pull out properties that have code violations and are also behind on their taxes, and the owner's mailing address is vacant or something, mm-hmm. Like stuff where we have to go kind of deep, but the likelihood that property has some distress and is a potential candidate to trade at a discount is higher. let's say you just talked to 100 people in your neighborhood and offered them 70% of the value of the property, you probably wouldn't get a deal. But if you lined up 100 people that are, in a divorce on an adjustable rate mortgage right now, and the property is vacant, and talk to 100 of those, you might get a couple of deals at 70% of the value or whatever there. So that's kind of how you do it. It's getting in front of the highest likelihood, candidates and making your pitch and seeing if you can make a deal.
Makes total sense. That's actually really smart. And then you mentioned that you're creating a marketing strategy. You alluded to kind of a multi-channel marketing strategy. So walk through that. What does that include? Direct mail, phone calls, social media, mailers, signs? Like what would a strategy look like once you'd identified those likely characteristics?
Yeah. So depending on the characteristics, they might have a slight variation in the sequence of touches that they receive, but it's a combination of basically everything that you put out there, Josh. I mean, we start with first they get mailers as soon as they hit our database, and that usually continues on a monthly or quarterly or some kind of schedule. So they continue getting mail touches. While mail's going out to them, they're getting called and, reached out to repeatedly by, our reps that are trying to get in contact with them. So that's usually phone, sometimes text, sometimes email. If it's a really, high likelihood property that we're trying to find the person for, we do, like there's a marketing provider that takes our mailing list and creates like audiences out of that for online ads and retargets them online at the same time too.
Target audiences on social. Yeah.
So we're kind of trying to hit it from all angles to get in front of those people that are on our, in our database. But a lot of it is outbound, and a lot of it is like kind of meticulous, almost, researching and going deep on it. Because some of the time, the people don't want to talk to anybody or hard to find. So it takes some like pretty crazy level of research to hunt them down sometimes.
Yeah. So help me understand that a little bit. Like, are there data companies that you outsource that to? Is it county records? Like, how are you getting that data, and how do you go deep on that data?
Yeah, so we use like a ton of different softwares to pull, the basic public record stuff. And going really deep on it though, like let's say, for example, a market like Chicago, some of the data like between the county recorder's office, the treasurer's office, and like the court systems, there's no aggregator that I found online that has all of that data accurately. So you're kind of forced to figure out the systems or work with, like document retrieval firms and paralegals and stuff like that, and have them assist you in going out to get certain documents. But it's really kind of like seat time on researching. And, I've been clicking around on the Cook County assessors for 10 years. Like, I'll open up start researching a property. My title lady came to our office a couple of weeks ago, and we like sat down to look at some files, and I'm like flying through all the websites. She's like, holy shit, like I don't even know some of this stuff. So it's really just doing the research repeatedly and finding out, where you can find what information on a lot of the county stuff. Always the county portals are going to have like, that's the truest source. Yeah. And then going back from that, for broader stuff, so there's some good aggregators. Property Radar is good. I think they're nationwide now. So there's different providers like that can help with the data too. But ultimately getting down in there in the county records is the best way to go.
Right on. Last question along this line of questioning, because I just found it fascinating. How do you, so once you find those characteristics, divorce, adjustable rate, code violations, that was great. How do you then get the phone numbers for those characteristics?
So you could take in, like, there's different data providers that'll give you, if you punch in, an address and a name, it'll spit out some contact info, and,
you pay for that? That's like a paid software service?
Yeah. I can drop, actually, Skip Genie is one that's good. That's like publicly available and stuff. And it's not super expensive, like Intellius and White Pages, stuff like that. So usually though, what you'll see is like, if you put in a big list, you get a bunch of phone numbers for the person, half of them are disconnected. Yeah. It's a process to get through, but it gives you, it works. It's a little bit of brain damage, but it works. So there's some websites like that.
I think the genius about what you're doing is that it's a multi-pronged approach. And I've studied a lot about marketing and how many impressions it takes to actually get somebody to respond. I did a lot of, I spent 10 years learning direct response marketing. And that is, how do I put out a message that creates somebody to raise their hand and say, I'm potentially interested? So rather than me just cold calling the phone book, like you said, I'm going to find some characteristics, a target market. I'm going to put out some sort of a broadcast or message on some medium, and then that person's going to respond to me. So I got an inbound phone call. It's like exactly what you're really describing. And one of the things that Dan Kennedy, who's the godfather of direct response marketing, talks a lot about is you have to think about and match your market. That's the characteristics that you talked about. Your message. What's going to be attractive to them? Can you talk about their problems and how you can solve their problems in as few words as possible? And then the media. And I like how you're approaching that. I'm going to call them. We're going to send something to them right away. We're going to create an audience on social media. Was there another one that I missed? Do you do any texting at all?
Yeah, we do. We'll text, email, whatever we need it, to try and get that hand raise up.
Yep. Right on. Cool. Well, I mean, you're literally deconstructing Dan Kennedy's consumer direct marketing. So that was great. Thank you. That was super helpful for me. All right. So what kind of let's go. I had another question, but before we go on to it, so you did a great job telling about wholesaling and how you have a specialized skill set to find these deals. So let's talk about flipping then, and walk us through your evolution from wholesaling to flipping and kind of what your business model looks like now.
Yeah. So basically, as I was kind of ramping up the wholesaling stuff. I was doing some of it remotely, out of state as well. I was running a lot of PPC at that time and like targeting. When I first started getting some momentum, I was doing like targeting all of Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin on PPC, just the whole state. So I'd get like $1 or cheaper clicks, but they'd be like a house in a 5,000 population town in the middle of Illinois somewhere. But so I was doing these super cheap houses like that. And that was good for a while. But after I started getting a little bit of success in the wholesaling, I decided to move to Colorado, which I was in like 2015. And once I got into Colorado, I was still doing this for a while, but I started networking with people in Colorado and starting to get deals in Colorado, like wholesale deals. So I did a couple there, but then I'm going to meetup groups and stuff like that. And I'm like, I need a lender. I want to start flipping this stuff. Instead of making, $10,000 on assignment, I can make $60,000 on this house if I could just finance it and do the kitchen and put it up for sale. So I would go to meetup groups and I'd kind of, whenever they give you a chance to get the mic, I'd go up, say, hey, I sold this deal. I made 10,000. If someone would have given me 150 grand, we could have made, 50,000 or whatever. And did that a few times and basically like got connected to people. And sometimes there was people at the meetups that would be interested in partnering or investing with me on a deal. And that's kind of how it evolved was, unlocking that capital is what you need to kind of well, there's a lot of other parts to flipping beyond wholesaling than just the capital. But at least when I'm back then, I was like, all I need is the money. It's going to be really easy.
Figure the rest out.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what happened. But, so then basically that's how it was. And I got the first deal through someone that I knew in the kind of that I was making the rounds on meetups with, that they had funded one of his deals. It was a private lender and they did one of mine. And then that lender I still work with today to this day and have done millions of dollars in business with. And so that's kind of how it transitioned, was getting some of those private money relationships. And I just kind of started buying as much of it as I could, leveraging those private money relationships. And back then, even by the time I started flipping was probably 2017. I was in Colorado for like a year or two doing the remote wholesaling and stuff. But by the time I started flipping, Colorado was on fire already. Population was growing like crazy at that time because of the legal cannabis and stuff. And we were getting multiple offers, like crazy bidding wars, 2020 style or 2021 post-COVID style frenzy was like kind of happening already in Colorado at that time. So, it was a good market to get into the flipping and start kind of, learning it while the market's super in your favor. Definitely helped us out on some deals. But that's kind of how the transition looked. And it's just been, expanding on that since.
So first of all, I just want to point out like your willingness to jump into things that you don't know all the pieces of the equation. part of the challenge that I see people have as it relates to getting into real estate is they think they need to know every step or every piece of the equation before they get in. And in my experience, and tell me if this is true for you, Igor, that's just impossible. Like you have to kind of go into it with a growth mindset and be like, look, I can see the next 3 steps, and I have to have faith that as I work through these next 3 steps, the next 3 problems or challenges or obstacles will present themselves to me, and I'll figure out those next 3 challenges once I get into it. But you can't learn all this shit from a book or from, watching a YouTube video. Like, you got to get into the deal, take a risk, and then figure it out and make it go right. Anything you would add to that? Because I see you definitely just having no fear to just charge into those things.
Yeah, I'd 100% agree. And I'm totally on that side of it where, like, let's just get into the deal. And I understand just the very basic stuff I need to understand, and I'll go into it head first. And there's a bunch of stuff that'll come up and you'll have to figure out as it goes.
Yeah.
But, I think you make a great point there. And I heard that somewhere too. I don't remember if it was a book or something, but you don't need to have the whole staircase plotted out. Like, as long as you need to see the whole one step in front of you, and that's all. And because if I needed to know everything, there's so many things I didn't know going into it. It's like crazy. After you do it for a while, you're like, wow, and there's a ton of stuff that I'm learning, every day. So it's really impossible to know everything. I think another analogy was with your car, at night, you're driving 70 miles an hour. You can only see 10, 15 feet in front of you with the headlights, right. But you're still going, you're cruising, and if something pops up, you'll figure it out. So it's kind of the same thing in real life.
It's a great analogy. There's the woman's name escapes me, Dr. Hopefully it'll come to me in just a second. Brilliant woman. And she has this whole framework. It came from academics around growth mindset. And she said, the difference that I've found between successful kids and not successful kids, that's probably not the word successful, but kids that are flourishing and kids that aren't. One of the big differences is the kids that are flourishing have a growth mindset, and you can actually teach growth mind. Dr. Carol Dweck is her name. And she says the kids that I observe that do the best have this mindset that I don't know how to do something yet. And it's like they know, to your point, Igor, I'm going to drive this road until I learn the next turn and the next turn and how to accelerate and decelerate. And then there's another segment of kids that they have I can't do that because I don't know how to do it mindset, right? And so her whole thing is, how do we cultivate kids to have a growth mindset where, they don't know how to do it, but they have a belief that they don't know how to do it yet. And that's really what you're describing. And I think you have to have that to get started in the real estate game.
Yeah, I mean, just in life in general, I can't imagine, I think a person that takes that approach or has that mindset of I can't do this, period. I just can't do it, because, instead of I can't do this, but why wouldn't I be capable of learning it,
Right.
I think the people that are in the camp of I can't do it, so that's it, are just in a way worse position through, in business, but in everything else too. I mean, that would be, I think the growth mindset is essential. So good point.
Yeah. And I find myself sometimes, coming up against something and I'm like, oh man, I don't know how to do that. That sounds like it's going to be hard. And I created a mechanism in my mind where whenever I start feeling that way, that's an indicator. That's the direction you're going. You don't have a choice. That you're gonna learn that thing because that's what's holding you back right now. So if we can create that in ourselves where we feel that resistance, that's an indicator. That's the direction we need to go to figure that thing out. I think that also.
I bet that's led to some awesome breakthroughs too. So that's that's awesome.
Amen. Right on, man. Cool. Well, that was fun. All right, so you moved on to combining the wholesaler skill with the flipping skill. So walk us through some lessons. One of the things that I think is really interesting, having, owned, bought, renovated, never been a good flipper. We were a holder, but going through that renovation process is your team is so essential in terms of your renovation team. So how have you gone about finding, creating, building teams that do these renovations for your flips throughout the country? Can you tell us a little bit how you built that? How do you manage that? How do you keep it under control? What wisdom can you share there?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, as we continue to grow and we're doing this stuff in different markets, it's like that's I think one of the most challenging components of it is building those contractor relationships, maintaining those relationships, managing those relationships is really challenging. So, I mean, for us, we run a system where we're working with GCs in the local markets, but we're talking to a lot of them and we're vetting them, hard because I can't imagine, like, for example, in Chicago for the normal, homeowner that's not a professional flipper, in some, especially like some lower income and like affordable first time home buyer kind of neighborhoods that we do stuff, like the large majority of contractors are awful in my experience in these areas and sometimes in different markets too. It's crazy. So, we make sure to vet them. We need to see, that you've done 3 houses for flippers or in a flipper kind of finish that have sold in the last year. Like I need to see the addresses. I need to go to the property if I can. I need to, see the photography after it was done and scrutinize the heck out of it and make sure this guy actually knows, what he's doing, that he's done this kind of, work before. We like to get our contract signed with a whole bunch of liability kind of stuff, but getting the draw schedule and the itemized bid all, squared away and signed before they start working. And then just staying, constantly on top of it. We do every morning here, we review every property that we own. We go through a quick, in Asana, we have a thing set up. We put when we bought it, when we're planning to close it, when it needs to be listed by, and then it has subtasks of all the other stuff that's going on with it. So every morning we run through that list. It's supposed to be a 15 to 30-minute call. Sometimes it goes a whole, heck of a lot longer, but every single morning we're intentional about seeing what's going on and moving every one of them forward. So it's a lot of work, but we kind of manage, and it seems like it's kind of, you're building the plane as you're flying kind of thing, especially with contractors. So, we still have issues to this day with contractors, but it's mitigating the risk as much as possible, making sure we're not, way ahead on the draws or anything for work that hasn't been done yet, keeping that super tight and just minimizing the risk for when things do go wrong so that we could, adapt and get it done. So that's a couple of points on the construction. I mean, I'm sure we could talk about that forever. There's so many, like that's a full-time job in itself. I'll touch a little bit on, I had a point because old family friend was hitting me up recently and like, I want to get into flipping houses because I want to make more money and I don't want to work like you guys. And we're like, we're like, I'm like, I'll help you find a deal or whatever if you really want to do this. But I'm like, be prepared. This is not an easy, like passive income or whatever kind of strategy. Like if you want one house, add 20 hours a week to your schedule right now and make sure you can allocate that to like staying on top of this property and getting the project completed. So it's really a full-time job. Even just a couple of houses happening at the same time using GCs is still, if you're doing it right and want to get it done quick, it's like you really have to be on top of these people, and it's almost a full-time job in itself.
Bro, that's so funny. I was talking to a buddy of mine recently, and he said something to the effect of like, "Oh man, you're so lucky. you're so lucky you started buying real estate 22 years ago." I was like, lucky? I'm like, you mother. I'm like, lucky? I was at 2:00 in the morning with still my suit on from my mortgage job, painting and changing toilets and the poopy wax rings at 2:00 in the morning. Bro. That ain't lucky, okay?
Yeah, exactly. It looks like luck after 20 years of freaking, putting in the sweat.
Totally. I want to go back to what you said about the GC, because I think this is such an incredibly crucial piece. Like for me, this is make or break success. This is one of these things that makes or breaks success. So what I heard you say was, one, you intentionally vet these GCs. You look at the jobs they've done, you look at their reputation, you ask them questions, you probably ask them, how do you bill us? What's your system for construction? Like, I'm guessing you want to get really granular on how they run their business. Could you anything else that you'd add to that?
I mean, I think that's really good. Like, cause that's the best shortcut out of all of the things you mentioned is like, I want to see projects that you've completed that look like the ones that I'm trying to do. Yes. And that'll eliminate so many GCs. Like, literally, 2 out of 4 that'll go give you a quote. You ask them for addresses, disappear, can't send you.
No
Can't
response.
So that eliminates a lot, because if you can see that finished product and they're bringing projects to completion, they're getting sold, it looks good, that kind of checks the boxes on a lot of the other things. But yeah, making sure, they've done these similar types of properties before, they understand the scope of the job, that they have their subs ready to go, that they've been working with their subs for a while, not that they're just starting up a new crew on your house.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good checklist kind of to start with. And ultimately I try to, especially during COVID and stuff over the last couple of years with supply chain issues and everyone getting, free money and everything, it was harder to find, good work. Luckily that's kind of starting to shift back in our favor a little bit now, which is great. But, at that time, like, getting people that want to actually show up and can do a good job was tough. So I forgot, I lost my train of thought there on the last point a little bit, but yeah, it's like really just vetting them, making sure that they've done, what you need them to do already 100 times in the past. And, oh yeah, a lot of them, what I was going to say, a lot of them back then are like, oh, I need half up front of like an 80K rehab. It's like, dude, what are you talking about? You do not need that.
Right.
So that's a tip I would give on top of just checking the comps and meaning properties that they've sold in the past, maybe checking some references as well, is making sure that your draw schedule makes sense. And like, you're not out, $40,000. Meanwhile, they haven't put a dollar into the house yet.
That is a nugget right there, bro. What percentage are you comfortable with? If it's an $80,000 bid, what are you comfortable giving them up front?
If it's a brand new guy, I'm not 100% sure. I might give them, your demos, $6,000, and then like you're doing framing rough after that, and it's 10 grand, let's say. I might give them half of that piece, like, give them even half the demo. Be like, I'll come back when it's done and it's all completed, and it's a little more intensive on the draws to go inspect and pay them out like that, but you could, save yourself a lot. And I've seen this so many times with new flippers where they'll buy a property, get screwed by a contractor. They're on a hard money loan. All their construction money's gone, and they're sitting with like a property that's just barely gutted out, and they've blown their whole budget already, and they're screwed. So I think that's a good tip, to just be super careful, super tight with the draws, and make sure that it's getting done, as it progresses, you get paying out, and you don't find yourself in that spot. For us, that's happened before, and we've, paid out a bunch of money, and it's not done. You got to pay that money again to someone else to go back and finish it, so you're in for double your budget, and we're doing a lot of them. So it's okay. But for someone that's the first time flipper, and you do that, and then you're 100 grand in the hole, that's could be a big problem.
Yep. What strikes me is how freaking intentional you are. You're intentional about your marketing, and you're finding the deal. You're intentional about your interviewing and your research of the contractors that you choose. You're intentional how much money you pay them for the draw schedule. You're intentional with how you manage these projects through a project management system in Asana, excuse me. And I would just share with the listeners that the success isn't an accident, right? Jim Rohn says success leaves clues. And you at a high level, you might just think Igor's lucky. Maybe the real estate market's been in his favor. But when you dig into the details, you're like, damn, this dude is intentional. He's crossed the T's, he's dotted the I's. And so if you're thinking about making your first investment, take note of these things. Like, be just as intentional as he is on your first deal. You're going to make mistakes, but boy, this will save you from 50, 60, 70, 80% of those mistakes.
Yeah.
Killer nuggets here. All right, bro, I feel like this could be a Joe Rogan 3-hour interview, but neither of us have 3 hours. So first thing, I would really love to have you come back at a future time. And if I can do something to add value to you, please let me know. I'd love to do that. Let's wrap with this, dude. I noticed the tattoo on your right forearm, and it says, does it say your perception is your reality? You create your reality. Yeah. All right. What does that mean? Walk me through where that came from and what that means to you.
Yeah, man. So it's kind of goes back to when I mentioned I kind of got introduced to like, all of the self-help stuff and Tony Robbins and kind of had the like aha moment. And it was from the book Think and Grow Rich that is a
Napoleon
really
Hill.
good, yeah, Napoleon Hill Think and Grow Rich is a really good, interesting book about the law of attraction, which, some people believe in or not believe in. It basically is just states that like what you believe, really deeply and you can emotionalize, you can achieve.
Mm.
And basically your reality is just a reflection of like, what you think about, because what you think about turns into what actions you take, what habits you form, and that turns into who you become. So, I'm a believer of that. And like, coming from literally my parents had $50 when they came to America, we live, we were not rich, and then like not a great student in high school, just, buying and selling stuff, whatever, to, I still have a long way to go, but stuff that I'm doing nowadays, is I built a life and a career and a business that, is not generally someone that's from my past would,
Yeah.
would do. So it's like, I'll say you could do anything that you want, like basically no matter where you come from, as long as you really focus on it and believe that it's possible and take the necessary actions, you can do it. So that's kind of where that comes from, and got that tattooed when I was living in Colorado, and still, rings true for sure. So it's a good reminder.
Right on. What a great way to end this podcast. And coincidentally, Igor, that was one of the most transformational books in my life. That idea of writing down. In fact, I remember, I'll just share a quick story. Remember in that book where he says, write down with specificity where you want to be in 30 years or whatever your time horizon is, and then revisit that thing. I remember reading that and thinking, that is such a load of shit. Like, that is just such bullshit, right? And then I was like, but what if it isn't? All right, I better just do it just in case it isn't. And speaking to the law of attraction, like I remember writing down, I want to have 100 cash flow positive rental properties by the time I'm 50. I was 21-ish when I wrote that. By time I was 35, I had 100 cash flowing rental properties. And so the question I would throw out there is, would I have ever have gotten to 100 cash flowing rental properties if I hadn't set that intention 15 years earlier?
Right.
I don't know, man, but I think the chances are a lot better that I did, because I put that intention there. And then what you alluded to was the reticular activator that he describes, that once you set an intention with your heart and your soul and you can see it, and there's a saying, what a man can conceive and believe, he can achieve. And for all you women out there, this was written in the 20s, so insert woman. He should mean mankind. I mean mankind when I say that. And I believe that's so true. Once you conceive it in your head, 100 cash flow rental properties, what would that feel like? What would my life be like? Who would I attract? Who would I need to be around? Once you can conceive it and you can believe it, like, man, I could see my steps. I don't know all the paths there, right? I can only see a few of the stairs, as Igor said. I can only see around the next corner, but I could see where I'm headed if I just keep kind of following this path. And then you get to this place where you believe you can achieve it. And in that process of conceiving, believing, and incremental achieving, you start to trigger your reticular activator, where you just see that everywhere. There's another deal. There's another property. Oh, this person wants to sell and they got a 3% mortgage. I could just assume their house and give them 20 grand and assume their mortgage, and I'm one step forward. And you just see these opportunities everywhere. But if you don't conceive it and you don't write it down, your reticular activator doesn't kick in and you ain't going to attract it. So beautiful, man. I love it.
That ties in super well, actually, to your point from earlier of like the, growth mindset versus the alternative. And like, if you're not in the growth mindset, that's why I say like, that's a bad spot to be, because it doesn't open you to all the possibilities that get introduced into your life when you like, really think about how what you want in detail, and the ideas start coming of how you could do it, start taking those actions. It's like growth mindset is essential to that too. So it's cool how you brought that back full circle.
Right on, man. Well, this has been an absolute blast. I hope we connect again soon. And any final words you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, no, it's been great to jump on with you, Josh. I appreciate it. And yeah, we've got to do another one at some point for sure. This has been great.
Looking forward to it.